In today's episode of You Can't Win, I get to cut up more new parts. Welcome back, everybody. More parts for the truck. I have got my plug wires, the custom ones that I need to measure and assemble. And I also got some brackets to hold them away from anything hot, which is what I showed you in the beginning of this video. These are nice parts. I'm not knocking Summit. These are their house brand wire holders. But the issue with the headers that I got is that they're too long, and when they go on, the holder part actually was touching the header. Well, that defeats the whole purpose of having them up so that they don't touch the header. So I had to cut basically behind this hole, which is a locator tab. I cut right underneath that and shortened them up, and I got it pushed all the way back against the frame, and now they have enough clearance. So now I got to do that with, well, at least the passenger side and possibly the driver's side. I haven't checked it out yet. And then now that I've got that cut, I need to drill a hole in it for that locator tab, which is what I'm going to be doing here. Here are all the plugs cut down to length and numbered. So now I actually need to take these back home where I have my vise set up. There's a little jig that comes with the kit to compress the terminals onto the wires that needs a vise to do that. So, but these have all been loomed and placed. Clearance is good around the headers. So I just need to put the ring terminal ends on, and then the boots, then the terminals, and they'll be ready to go. One of the other lingering issues from Sunday, Monday, was the choke and why it wasn't opening. I knew I had 12 volts on this lead when I tasked it for the choke, and then when I went to start it, it had no power. So I dug into that, tested, got the multimeter out, and funny thing is, today when I tested it, it had 12 volts. Then it didn't. Again, the choke wouldn't open. It's like it overloaded or something, and I lost voltage to it. So I went to the fuse block and found that this is the actual wire for the ECM on the original wiring. So that goes to the engine control module in the original setup. So I know it's constant power with ignition, obviously, but I found the fuse was broken. And now I replaced the fuse, and if you look at my choke, nothing's being done right now. This is all just temperature based with the thermostat in the choke. The choke's opening according to the ambient temperature outside. So right now everything's working. In fact, you can actually see it move there a little bit as it warms up a little more. So choke's working. I've got full throw on the throttle. I do have to adjust the throttle linkage still. Hopefully that wire doesn't keep blowing. If so, I'll have to trace it down or find a different source for the 12 volt power for the choke. But as of right now, this is fixed. All right, well, I still got to go home and get the spark plugs assembled, but before I left it, I did some more work. I got my heater hoses ran. They're all brand new, back to the heater core. New clamps and even new fittings in the water pump and on the manifold. In case anybody's wondering, this is a 3/4 inch half NPT, half threads, and that is a 5/8 half NPT, half threads. So I'll go ahead and shoot a little bit of video on how to assemble those spark plugs, and then come back and get those put on. All right, let's go over how to install the connector and the boot on a set of custom plug wires. The tools you're going to need are a razor blade, a pair of needle nose pliers. Depending on the kit you get, it may come with an installation block, which is a pretty useful tool, but if not, a set of plug wire crimpers. Specific tool does the exact same thing, and dielectric grease. So those are the tools you'll need. I'll go ahead and show you the parts for the plug wire. Okay, the parts you'll need, and these should come with your kit, is the terminal, the boot, and of course the wire. Now, with the stripping block and the razor blade, you're going to remove a section of the tip of the spark plug wire. That'll expose the electrode, the conductive core in the middle, and then that'll lay inside this terminal that then gets crimped down and then slid inside the boot. pretty basic stuff, but it's fiddly and a little intimidating if you haven't done this before. I have done it before, but I've never had the luxury of this little crimping block here, this jig. I always just use needle nose pliers or crescent wrench or something to crimp the wire down on the old hot rods we used to have, but I'm going to try to do these a little more professionally, and we'll go through this each step. So with this jig, there's 3 different holes, one for a 7, an 8, and then an 8.5 millimeter wire. I have 8 millimeter wires, and it gives you a depth guide of how far to insert the plug wire to make the cut to expose the electrode. That is when you will use your razor blade. You'll slide the razor blade against the back of the block and press it down all the way. Sorry, let me tighten the vise up here a little bit. Press that down against the back of the block, and then you will roll the spark plug, kind of holding the razor blade down flat, and that's going to cut the circumference of the jacket and then expose the core. Let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've rolled it. You see now there's a nice even cut line in the plug, and we're simply going to pull those apart. So I was able to just pull that piece off, and that evenly cut and did not get into the conductor. So now that is exposed, and we're ready to lay it inside of the connector. Now to lay it inside the connector, you want to fold the conductor over itself onto the outside jacket of the plug wire. Then you will take your connector and place it inside of that to hold it flat against the metal part, and that way it'll have a nice good metal to metal connection to make your crimp. The next thing that is recommended is, if you look inside your connector here, there's little wings. If you see, there's just this little bit of a indentation in the upper parts, this U part here. You want to take some needle nose pliers and start the bend of that before you put it in the crimping blocks. You want to bend them over probably at least 60, if not 90 degrees over on themselves. With a word of caution, once you do that, you will inevitably decrease the circumference of this connector, and your plug wire will not lay down in it. So what I do is, after I've bent these over, I put the needle nose back inside of it and use it as a negative leverage and spread it apart, and that'll open the inside back up to fit the plug wire back in. So let me go ahead and get these bent. Now here it is prepped and ready to get the plug wire sit inside of it. Notice I've started the bending process here so that the little crimper block can fold these wings down and make a nice solid crimp inside the jacket of the plug wire. So now we'll fold that conductor over the wire and insert it into this connector. Now here's the plug wire inserted in the connector, and you notice it goes forward of the connector about 3/8 of an inch. That's what the instructions say. And if you look at the conductor, it is folded back around the jacket and underneath the connector. And that's the way you want it. Then we'll go ahead and get this block set up. Now this block, if you look at it, has a center channel. That's where the spark plug will fit. And then the other side of it has this M with the ridge in the middle. That is what's going to press down on those wings between them and force them down into the jacket, and that's why you want to bend those tabs over before you get to this point, so it doesn't sit on top of them and end up crushing them down straight. You want them to fold over inside of that M or that V, depending on how you're looking at it. This is the plug after I got it back through and crimped down a little bit. Now I mentioned you may have to spread this connector apart after you fold these wings over. If you overspread them, that's fine. Just take your pliers and crimp them back down with the wire inside until it fits inside the channel of your connector block or your crimpers, whatever you're using. So here's the block assembled. You'll notice the connector is outside of the perimeter of it, and the plug with the connector, that little channel between the wings, the M or V, is set in between that. Now when you set it in the vise, it will crimp down and press those together, giving you a nice solid crimp. Now here it is in the vise. Just roll the vise down until it bottoms out. Don't over tighten it. You'll notice when the resistance is starting to kick back to you. And then take it back out. We'll take it out of the block. Sorry, I have to let the camera down. Then, when you look at the plug wire, you have a perfect crimp right there. Nice and tight. And your conductor is flat against the inside of the connector. Now to slide the boot on it. Now to assemble the spark plug boot, you're going to put a dab of dielectric grease on the top of the connector in the front here and then on the top. And then you'll also want to put some inside the entry end of the boot. Now, I guess I should have mentioned this, and hopefully you're watching this all the way through if you're using this as a tutorial. On the newer style, the HEI style, you put the boot on after you've made the crimp. On the old style, you will have to put the boot on before you crimp. So that is a procedural difference, and make sure you know which order you're going in. So let me get some dielectric grease on this crown here, on this connector. A little there inside the boot. And see if I can set this camera up. You know, I bet if I held it in the vise, that would probably help. Nice little view you're getting there, I'll bet. Hope I don't crush the GoPro. Nope. All right. So, you look at this. Now make sure that the connection open end is down, facing the down side of the boot. That's going to go on the distributor cap when you start working this on. And you literally, they don't go on as hard as you think. You just push straight in with that grease and just keep pushing in until the connector clears. You'll feel a little resistance and then it will give. And then you just keep pushing forward until the boot goes, or the wire goes all the way inside the boot. And then rotate it if you need to. And then you'll see, well, let me take you back out of the vise and get some light. And if you look in there, the connector is perfectly aligned inside the boot. So that's how you make a custom plug wire. Not too difficult. I suggest, if you have the ability, if you have an old spark plug wire, then you might want to disassemble it to see how it was assembled. Or you could take a length, because you're inevitably going to cut some of these and have maybe 5-6 inches of extra wire once you've loomed them to where you want them to be. Go ahead and use that to practice the stripping and pressing and getting everything together before you actually do a crimp. Don't do a crimp because you'll waste the crimp, but practice on that extra scrap piece of wire you're inevitably going to cut off when you custom route these to get the process down. And then you can actually take this boot off even if you have to, so use enough grease so you can slide it back off. But yeah, just go ahead and practice on it before you actually do any crimping, and that way you'll have the process down before you attempt it for sure for the first time. Okay, here are the plug wires all installed, loomed through. Get you tucked back there, back to the cap. The passenger side here. So I got a couple of the boot protectors because I know there's two that get really close to the headers. So got 2 boot protectors. I'll probably get a full set eventually, just go ahead and put them on all of them. But for now, the 2 that are closest are protected. These things are expensive at AutoZone, $20 for 2 of them. So I'm gonna Amazon a set of those. But the loom job turned out really well. They're nice and tucked. They're all in their holders. The little modification I had to do to these brackets worked just fine. I am gonna have to get a zip tie. There's supposed to be one of these clips like this on this bracket, but that sticks out too far, gets too close to the header. So this hole that was already in the bracket, I'm gonna get a zip tie and zip tie these 2 plug wires just straight to the hole like such. And that'll still keep them away from everything. But the rest of them went on and have good enough clearance. So that turned out really well. Yeah, okay. That'll probably pretty much cover this installment. It was easy work, just building plug wires and whatnot. So, but I'm glad it turned out the way I wanted. It looks fairly organized underneath here, and I'll just know after I start it if all the plug wires are working right. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again next time.